Good morning, YouTube, and today I'll be profiling for you my Ancient Warrior deck post-Eternity Code. A couple of things before we hop into it. I'm going to avoid butchering their specific names and just put a "the" where the dash is in order to save that time. And I've kind of set this up in a weird, different way so you can see my approach and take onto it. But I'll explain it as we go, and let's hop right into it. Starting off with our monsters, we run one of the Ambitious. While you control another Ancient Warrior monster, your opponent cannot target him with card effects, which is pretty amazing. But the first bolded effect is pretty darn awesome. If a card your opponent controls is destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can send one other card from your hand or field to the graveyard and special summon him from your hand. So not only can you do that in terms of a battle phase aspect, you can also utilize it if your opponent destroys their own monsters for their own card effects or their own cards. Yeah. So that itself is pretty darn cool. And then additionally, when he destroys an opponent's monster and sends it to the graveyard, you can special summon that monster onto your side of the field in the defense position. So this allows you to potentially set up for plays if your OTK doesn't go through, which that's the primary goal I'm aiming for with this deck, is to make it more of an OTK centric, so there's a lot of weird choices for that. Still sticking with the fire attributes, we run one of the Fearsome. All other Ancient Warrior monsters you control can't be destroyed by battle, which kind of plays in line with his effect. At the start of the damage step, you can, if your monster attacks an opponent's monster, you can special summon him from your hand, and that opponent's monster loses 1,000 attack. So it allows you to get over that with some nice ease. Plus, the fact that it can't be destroyed by battle can either allow you to just special summon him, or can give you that extra edge you need. And if a card your opponent controls is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. So, additional just popping. I've seen a lot of people elect not to play him, probably because he is a higher level of a monster, but I enjoy him in the deck, and I don't see myself cutting him anytime soon. Rounding up the fire attributes, run one of the Deceptive. He is the only level 4 fire attribute, and since this deck relies a lot on having different numbers of different attributes, I decided to run him in here at 1. His effect is okay. You can elect not to run him, but I do because I like him. You can target one continuous face-up spell trap card you control. Doesn't have to be an Ancient Warrior one. Send it to the graveyard, and if you do, have the attack of 2 face-up monsters on the field until the end of the turn. Nice part is that doesn't target. And if a card your opponent controls is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one Ancient Warrior card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So it gives you some nice recursion, especially because you're going to be sending these Ancient Warrior cards to the graveyard as is. I feel like if his stats were swapped, that would make him a little bit of a better monster, but all in all, I think he's pretty decent, and I'm going to run him in here at 1, maybe eventually run him up at 2. Moving on to the wind attributes, again, I kind of set up in a weird way. Run one of the Valiant. I've seen a lot of people run 2, because he's really amazing to see, because if you control 2 Ancient Warrior monsters, you can just flat out special summon them from your hand. The only reason I run 1 is because he's searchable, and if you run 2 in your hand, then you can't bring out both of them. So it gives you a little bit of less of a chance of bricking, but that's my justification. He gains 300 attack for each monster your opponent controls during your turn, and then if your opponent controls more monsters than you can do, he can attack twice on opponent's monsters. So it allows you to push for that damage that can hopefully allow you to OTK with your other monsters. So I enjoy him in here in the deck at 1. You can definitely decide to bump him up if you want to. One of my personal favorites is one of the Loyal. He can be flat out special summoned if your opponent controls a monster. You don't have to control, by the way, you don't have to control less monsters. You can just flat out special summon him. And if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, he has the additional effect that can just flat out pop a card in the field. Pop a monster in the field. So that can bait out any negates that they might have. But all in all, he's a level 7, which will come in handy with the extra deck. And he's a 2500 beat stick. For a free special summon, I enjoy him in here in the deck. Next, we run 3 of the Virtuous. This is one of the best monsters in the deck, in my opinion. He gives you the effect that if your opponent, if you control another Ancient Warrior, your opponent can't target him for attack, which is pretty decent. If your opponent controls more monsters, you can ditch a card from your hand, special summon an Ancient Warrior from your deck. Anyone. That's just pretty darn cool, aside from himself, of course. And if an attack is declared involving another Ancient Warrior, you can just flat out draw a card. Card advantage gives you a search from the deck. I don't see why people would not run him at 3, but if you do so, explain to me in the comments. I'm interested to hear. Next, run 2 of the Ingenious. I was wanting to run 3, but the more I test him, the less I kind of liked him at that number. He gives you some disruption. That is the biggest thing. This allows you to potentially go first, depending on your build. If he's added from your deck to your hand, which can be done by the Masterful, you can flat out special summon him. That's pretty darn cool. And then whenever a spell or trap card is activated, you can negate the activation by sending an Ancient Warrior spell or trap card. And then additionally, if you control the Virtuous, then you can also potentially negate a monster effect. So it gives you some blanket negation, plus he's a free special summon depending on if you add him from your deck to your hand. So that's done primarily, but not only, by the Masterful, which you run 3 of. Amazing stats. First off, this is moving on to the water attributes, mind you. And then while you control another Ancient Warrior, he has the same effect as the Virtuous, which allows him to not be destroyed or attacked. So if you have them both on the field, you have the old Marauding Captain lock, where they can't attack your monsters at all, or either one of those two if that's the case. His effect is you can ditch a card from your hand or field to the graveyard to add a card from your deck to your hand, and any Ancient Warriors. So that's pretty darn amazing. Sometimes you'll go for the Ingenious, sometimes you're going to go for your big dudes that you just don't have yet. All around, he's a fantastic place starter. If you see him in your opening hand, you're feeling pretty solid. And then if your other Ancient Warrior monster's effect is activated except during the damage step, you can target a monster your opponent controls and just return it back to their hand. So while that does target, it still is pretty darn amazing and a very versatile card. One of your other key monster in this deck. And the card I was iffy about running a playset of is the Graceful. He has a pretty solid stats, but usually these OTK kind of decks want a little bit more of a solid thing. You can target a continuous spell or trap card you control, send it to the graveyard, and if you do, add an Ancient Warrior spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. That's the reason I kept him in here at 3, because there's some really solid Ancient Warrior spells and trap cards, so I keep that in here. And then additionally, you can, if an Ancient Warrior monster's effect is activated, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls and negate its effects at the end of the turn. So that immediately asks for a response, so you can hopefully pop off with the rest of your plays. So he's versatile enough, but I feel like if they come out with something better, I haven't looked too much into the other support other than the Link monster, but I like him at 3 currently. Rounding up our Ancient Warriors, I have one of the Eccentric. This is just to add that 7th water attribute, because most of this deck, as you can see, is wind. So I like him as another thing. Plus it gives you the option of popping some back row, which this deck kind of needs if your opponent is playing a particular deck like that. And then additionally, you can add an Ancient Warrior spell or trap card with a different name from your graveyard to your hand, so it allows you to potentially recycle. So he's definitely, if I were you, I'd consider possibly swapping him out, but I like him in here because it makes the deck a little bit more versatile than just the OTK, but, it's up to you, your choice. Moving on to our hand traps, we run 2 of the Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion. My mindset behind this, rather than necessarily an Ash Blossom, is thinking about what your opponents are going to be playing, is a lot of stuff is just going to be revolving the graveyard. Block Dragon is really big nowadays. Any of your big dudes, let's see, Eldritch revolves around the graveyard just a little bit. So this is just, I'm kind of testing it, but right now I like this at 2. And then just for flat out blanket negation, I run 3 of Infinite Impermanence. Just these 5 disruptions. You can obviously swap these out for some more consistency cards, such as Desires or Extravagance or whatever else you want to swap for it. But I like this because it gives you some interruptions, which is what going second decks really need in order to potentially pop off. I decided to run these over some board wipes because the deck kind of relies on your opponent having monsters at the end of the turn, so you want to prevent them from getting a solid board, but you want them to have a board in general so you can punch face, which is kind of a weird way of approaching it. Since we're still on the traps, I might have figured I might as well throw in one of the Ancient Warrior Saga, the Defense. I've seen a lot of people, again, run 2 of this. It gives you a negate attack on your turn if it's face up on the field, plus it makes it so that you all have ancient gear effects, essentially, where they can't activate spells and traps in response to your attack, which is pretty cool, but I utilize it more so for the effect where you can ban it when your opponent monster declares an attack, you can banish it from graveyard, and special summon an Ancient Warrior from deck. So this allows you to potentially survive any onslaughts. It's searchable from the deck, which is, again, only why I run it at 1, but you might consider bumping this up if you don't have some of the other cards, or if you just want to try out different ratios. One I would say you should definitely run at 3 is the 3 visits. During your main phase, if you normal special summon an Ancient Warrior monster, which you hopefully will be doing, you can target that monster and then add one from a different name from your deck to your hand. If it's sent from the spell or trap card zone to the graveyard, you can special summon an Ancient Warrior monster from your hand. So not only does it allow you to search for a monster, but it can potentially let you special summon that one or something completely different. So it has so much versatility in it, and I wouldn't suggest running this any less than 3. Next, we're running a playset of the Borrowing of Arrows. I like this because it allows you to potentially search for the 3 visits, and it gives you a little bit of an attack boost, allows you to potentially go over bigger things than you. I was originally only running it at 1 because it was just a battle effect, but then I reread it and I was like, oh, you control 2 different attributes, which is again why I separated it the way I did. You can add an Ancient Warrior spell or trap card from your deck to your hand, and then continue to extend your plays. So I like it for that fact, add a playset because it searches and it can potentially allow you to OTK a little bit quicker. Next, we run two off of the Alliance. This is kind of a weird one in that it can negate monster effects of a certain attribute for that turn, so that gives you some weird disruption, and again, requires an immediate response. Otherwise, they can't, you can pop off, hopefully, potentially. And then you can make all Ancient Warrior monsters you control gain 300 attack if a monster is special summoned using an Ancient Warrior effect. So just that little attack boost isn't that much, but the fact that it can negate monster effects is pretty darn cool. And you have a decent amount of that in this deck. Moving on from the Ancient Warrior spell or traps, run a playset of Tenki. Tenki is a free search, doesn't require you to have an Ancient Warrior, so it can those bricky hands it can unclog. This will be easy Ash Blossom bait. And the nice fact is that a lot of the Ancient Warriors require you just to send a face-up continuous card, so it's almost like they wanted the Fire Formation cards to work with it, and Tenki is the best one in that aspect. I run a playset of Tensu. I did this in my last one, and I'm going to continue doing it because having those 2 different attributes on the field is kind of essential for getting your plays off. Plus, there's a lot of situations where your monster's effect of your extensions of your 2 of Sun Mu, the Masterful, and Lu Xuan, the Virtuous, will be negated, so you need that extra normal summon in order to continue playing in those situations, or just to get around weird bricky hands you might have. And then the last card in the deck, in the main deck, is a Fire Formation Ingen. This is definitely a tech choice. I wouldn't necessarily recommend running it, but it's quite fun and it allows you to push for some extra damage and game. So that's how I wrap up the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, we start off with only the one of the Swan. The nice part about him is he just requires 2 Beast Warrior type monsters, which your entire deck, other than the Ghost spells, is. So when you special summon, you can inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each fire formation spell or trap card you control, which will probably just be Ingen. So that's just a little bit of burn. But during the battle phase, you can send 1 face-up fire formation spell or trap card you control. Again, you should have Ingen on the field. So target 1 card your opponent controls and pop it. He gives you the ability to clear a card in the field, potentially extend more so with your Ancient Warrior monsters, because there's going to be a lot of times where you're going to have filled up your board pretty quickly. So it allows you to potentially clear that, pop a card on the field, and do just a little bit of burn damage. So I like him in here at 1. That's part of the tech choice of the Ingen. Moving on to our Xyz, we're on 1 of the Firefying Dermadal. He requires 2 Beast Warrior and Winged Beast monsters. He gains 100 attack for each of those on the field. And then once per turn, you can target a spell or trap card on each side of the field and pop them. So it's kind of a weaker Dust Tornado, but it can potentially allow you to pop up some of the other cards. But then whenever it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you could target one of your Beast Warriors in this case and just flat out return it to the hand. So it gives you some extra bit of recursion, and he's kind of a versatile card, especially until we get the Link monster for them. Especially, I'm going to like him in here at the one-off. Speaking of popping cards with a little bit less of a risk, you can just run a Nightmare Phoenix instead. Run 1 of the Cross Seat, because bringing back your monsters from the graveyard with your Ambitious gives you a free, just a monster in the field that you need to do something with. So if you want to potentially, when you're going into main phase 2, when you're trying to set up some protection, you can go to the Cross Sheep using their monster and the Ambitious, and then potentially pop off from that point. Moving on to our rank 3s, one of the Unicorns for some spot removal, and a Soldier of Chaos, because he has quite a bit of versatility in himself, in just getting some attack boost, clearing cards, attacking twice. So I like them in here, just personal choice. Rank 4s run an Appaloosa to set up for some negates, and an Access Code Talker, because I feel like he sets up some protection and board clearance a little bit better than Boral Sword. You can definitely run a Boral Sword, Boral Load. There's so many other options you can run instead of these two, but this is the choices I've went with in this case. Our Xyz, you can run a lot of rank 4s that you want to, but I decided to run the Baguska, Exciton Knight, a Tiger King, because again, all your monsters are Beast Warriors, and it searches for more of your Fire Formation Spell or Trap cards. So you can't complain there. A Cowboy, just in case you're pushing for that little bit of extra game damage, because there's a lot of times I've realized where this deck is just a little bit hair of a shy from completing the game state, and so you run the Cowboy just to hopefully get over that. And then a Big Eye and a Flare Metal Dragon for your rank 7s. Big Eye just to flat out clear your opponent's monsters, and then potentially go into links. And then Flare Metal, in case you're stuck with a situation where you just have the your Valiant and your Loyal on the field, you can land on a Flare Metal and let your opponent potentially kill themselves with just by burn damage. So I like this in here just for that reason. And that's going to wrap up my version of Ancient Warriors. Again, my goal for this deck is to go second and OTK. There's a lot of different little changes you can make and tweak in here, and I've seen a lot of decent builds out there that can do that, and then make them a little bit more versatile. One I personally enjoy is Arts with a Pro. He's doing a sealed only series with this. I've faced him in a tournament using going up against this deck. Really cool guy. And then just additionally, there's so many possibilities you can utilize in order to make this deck more versatile than just a going second OTK or bust deck. I decided not to run board wipes because, again, you need your opponent's monsters to be on the field in order to extend potentially, but it definitely has the possibility of going that route. Let me know what tweaks you would make. Obviously, there's a lot of room for improvement, either taking a card away from here or putting it there. I can definitely see why there'd be a lot of different opinions, and I'm really excited to see how this deck can perform in the future once when we get the Link monster. And I think there's another Spell or Trap card coming out. I'm not 100% certain in the next set. But the lore behind it is pretty cool. one of the 4 Chinese novels, Romancing the Three Kingdoms, I think. And then I think there's a video game on it as well. Right along, the artwork on it is fantastic. And the fact that each of these monsters has two or three effects that goes along with them could make a bit of a mind game, and your opponent won't read them a lot of times because, let's face it, reading takes a long time in this game. But it's definitely a deck I feel you should try out and tweak your own, and let me know what your opinion is then in the bottom. What cards would you take out? What cards would you put in? I'm really excited to hear, and then thank you for watching, and have a great day.